Kazaki show. I'm the Trev. It's too sweet. Anyway, continuing with retired numbers. Like I said, I want to be at 40 by the time this year is through. This is number 30. And the list keeps growing, so I need to get back on track. Anyway, we're starting off the New Jersey Devils. And it's probably about time. Really. I mean, they've only got about 5 numbers. So, I mean, this could be extensively long or very entertaining. Either way, we're going to keep doing it. So this one starts with a great beginning, or at least a complicated beginning, but it has a lot of success in between before the end. So we're going to talk about the number 4 hanging up in New Jersey. That belongs to their longtime captain, Scott Stevens. Let's do it. So our Scott Stevens in New Jersey career begins on September 3rd, 1991. You gotta remember, he's already a vet by this time. And this following bit's gonna sound a little bit confusing, but follow me on it. Thanks to an arbitrator's ruling. So the context is the St. Louis Blues, during the 91 offseason, signed restricted free agent Brendan Shanahan. Offer sheet and all. And as he was a restricted free agent, that meant the Devils were due to some form of compensation. And even though St. Louis was offering the likes of Curtis Joseph, Rod Brindamore, draft picks, the only thing the Devils wanted was Scott Stevens, who, like Shanahan the year before, was a restricted free agent and was offer sheeted and signed by St. Louis. Funny how that works, huh? So it went to arbitration with the ruling coming out in favor of the Devils. And initially, Stevens didn't want to report to New Jersey, and he wouldn't report until September 26th, so some 2 weeks after. The Devils were already short on leadership personnel after Kirk Muller, their captain at the time, walked out of training camp. And then they had to also put up with Stevens being forced upon the team, or at least that was the feeling. With some players arguing that because his contract was the way it was, they should have been offered more money from the team as well. But all things must pass, and during the 91-92 season, Stevens put up 59 points in 68 games. So not bad for a guy who didn't want to be there, while putting up 3 points in 7 playoff games. It's also notable during the season that he played in his first of 10 All-Star games as a New Jersey Devil, missing only 1 game in the time that he was with the club. And his play during the 91-92 season got him his second All-Star team nomination, his first with the New Jersey Devils. During the 1992 offseason, Scott Stevens was named new team captain, being awarded the C from former captain Bruce Driver. And this is a role he would hold his entire time in New Jersey. So after 1 season, he didn't want to be there. Now he's the captain of the team. This is just the start. For 92-93, the Devils just made the playoffs with the last place in the Patrick Division. And while Stevens managed to contribute with 57 points in 81 games, which led all defensemen on the team, the Devils would be eliminated in 5 games by the Penguins, with Stevens adding 4 points. But 93-94, that was a turnaround for the Devils, as they finished second in the Atlantic Division. Yeah, I just said Patrick 1 year and Atlantic the next because, division realignment. With 106 points, and Stevens put up a team record 60 assists, which still stands today, as well as a career high in team leading 78 points in 83 games. So he's just flourishing now in New Jersey. Stevens also led the league in plus minus with a plus 33. So that's pretty damn good too, which gave him an NHL plus minus award, because they still handed out an award for plus minus back then. The only player to surpass that number since was Vladimir Konstantinov in 1996. But despite all the good things happening with the Devils making it to the conference finals to the eventual Stanley Cup champs, the New York Rangers, I don't have to explain that one. In cross-state rivals, Stevens wound up putting up 11 points in 20 games. With the season Stevens had, he was awarded his only NHL first All-Star team nomination with the Devils and his second overall. And then we had our first lockout. So while other players played in charity games or played overseas to keep busy, Stevens remained largely inactive during the lockout. But when the NHL came back, so did Stevens. And even though the Devils would start off slow, winning only 9 games at the 24-game mark, because you remember lockout seasons, they only play 48 games. So 24 games was the halfway point. New Jersey still managed to make the playoffs, with Stevens putting up 22 points in 48 games. So he played a full lockout schedule. During their playoff run, Stevens would develop a reputation as a hard hitter, which was more than evident as the Devils managed to sweep the heavily favored Detroit Red Wings, which ultimately led to the Devils winning their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. Stevens would put up 8 points in 20 playoff games. But damn, they looked good as an underdog. So going into the 95-96 season, the expectation around the Devils was the expectation of defending their Stanley Cup from the previous season, which should be the expectation of all Stanley Cup winners, yeah? Stevens would play in his 1,000th NHL game during this season while putting up 20 points in full 82-game schedule. While the Devils played hard, and they played to win on most nights, they missed the playoffs for the first time in his time in New Jersey. The Devils would become the first team in 26 years to miss the playoffs the year after winning the Cup. So you got to imagine the drive for the next season is a little bit harder. So going into 96-97, that would see the Devils get back to their winning ways, seeing them finish first in the Eastern Conference and by extension first in the Atlantic Division, with Stevens putting up 24 points in 79 games. And while the Devils had home ice in their playoff run, they would lose in the conference semifinals to the New York Rangers, with Stevens putting up 4 points in 10 games. Stevens played during the regular season, would also see him get nominated to his second NHL second All-Star team. 97-98 almost went like 96-97 did, with the Devils leading the conference and the division again, with Stevens putting up 26 points, and this time in 80 games. And again, with home ice, the Devils lose in the playoffs, this time in the conference quarterfinals, which would only see Stevens put up 1 goal in 6 games played. 98-99, much of the same. Devils lead the regular season in the East, won the Atlantic Division. Stevens had 27 points, this time in 75 games. The Stevens put up 3 points in 7 playoff games, where they would lose again to the Rangers in the Eastern Conference quarterfinals. So what's in store for 99-2000? Well, you'd expect more of the same, right? Well, no, you wouldn't. It wasn't much of the same, as New Jersey didn't finish first in the division or the conference, but they did still manage to make the playoffs. And Stevens would finish the season with 29 points in 76 games. So the Devils managed to get past the Panthers relatively quickly before dispatching of the Maple Leafs to meet their division and conference rivals, even bitter rivals. You might as well just call it rivalry. The Philadelphia Flyers in the conference finals. And after Game 4, which saw the Devils down 3-1, Stevens helped win the game, more specifically Games 5 and 6, setting up a deciding Game 7. And of course, what stands out more in that Game 7, as opposed to a New Jersey 2-1 win over the Flyers, is this little thing right here. On a side note, this was Lindros' second game back after a concussion 2 months prior. That notwithstanding, though, the Devils at the time were the lowest seeded team to advance to the Stanley Cup Finals after seeding was introduced in the early 90s. This would eventually get replaced in 2006, but that's a different story. The opponent in the 2000 Stanley Cup Finals, though, was the defending Stanley Cup champs, the Dallas Stars. Yet despite starting off Game 1 with a flurry of goals, the rest of the series was dictated at a snail pace, with the Devils only limiting the Stars to 6 goals in the next 5 games. A lot of that was Stevens and, well, his partner Niedermayer too. To cap it all off, Stevens managed to get an assist on Jason Arnett's double overtime series winner to give Stevens and the Devils their second cup in 5 years. Despite only scoring 11 points in 23 playoff games, Stevens' leadership qualities earned him the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP for the 2000 playoffs. So for the 2000-2001 season, the expectation was the norm. Keep winning and defend the Stanley Cup. And they did manage once again a first-place finish in the Atlantic and a first-place finish in the Eastern Conference. Again, Stevens would score 31 points in 81 games. And for his regular season, Stevens was nominated, again, to the NHL's second All-Star team, as well as being a finalist in Norris Trophy voting, which is awarded to Best Defenseman. As far as the playoffs is concerned, it was almost a complete case of deja vu, with different teams, but, going through Carolina and Toronto again, and the Pittsburgh Penguins, complete with a returning Mario Lemieux. They ended up meeting the Colorado Avalanche for the Stanley Cup. The Devils even had a 3-2 series lead, but just could not overcome the Avalanche momentum, who was playing with Ray Bourque in the middle of Operation 16W, and ended up losing the cup in 7 games. Stevens would put up 8 points in 25 playoff games. The 01-02 season turned out to be Stevens' worst statistical year, only putting up 17 points in a full 82-game schedule. However, he did become the youngest player in NHL history to play in 1,500 career games. Now, while the Devils' season wasn't like previous seasons, they did manage to advance the playoffs, but were eliminated in the first round by eventual Stanley Cup finalists, the Carolina Hurricanes. This would also turn out to be his worst playoff statistical year, as he put up no points in 6 games. So if 01-02 was an off year for player and team alike, then 02-03 was definitely a rebound year for both. During the season, Scott Stevens was named captain of the Eastern Conference All-Star team in what turned out to be his last All-Star game. Stevens just finished the season with 20 points in 81 games. The Devils finished first in the Atlantic Division again, and saw them eliminate the Boston Bruins, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Ottawa Senators in 7 games, for another trip to the Stanley Cup Final, which turned out to be their 3rd visit in 4 years. It was during these playoffs that Stevens set the NHL record for most playoff games by a defenseman. It wouldn't be a cup run without a series-defining hit. The difference between this one and the previous one, though, is this one caused a Game 7. This didn't end up in a win. So with the series tied at 3, you can only think of one way this would end, in typical New Jersey fashion. So, thankfully, thanks to defense and solid goaltending, the door was shut, and the Devils won their 3rd Stanley Cup. So for both player and team alike, this is their 3rd cup in 9 years. Stevens would finish with 9 points in 24 playoff games. So we find ourselves at the 2003-2004 season, which ended up being his last. We'll get into that. Before ending the season, though, Stevens would pass former teammate Larry Murphy for the NHL's all-time games played by defenseman record, which has been since beaten twice. In January 2004, Stevens would be sidelined with what turned out to be a diagnosis as post-concussion syndrome, which eventually shut Stevens down for the year. In the 38 games he did play, though, he put up 12 points. And even though the Devils did make the playoffs, Stevens would not be in the lineup. Post-concussion syndrome and all. So the Devils were out in the first round. And really, it was more than just the Stevens injury that got them out. They were an injured unit to begin with. So after the conclusion of the playoffs, 304 season coming to an end, you know where I'm going with this one. The big one. No, again, with this lockout, like the last lockout, Stevens remained relatively inactive, choosing to continue his recovery while the NHL chose to decide to lose a season. But when they did come back for the 05-06 season, Stevens wouldn't. As on September 6th, 2005, Stevens announced his retirement from the NHL, mostly due to post-concussion syndrome. But that's the career, or at least the highlights of it. Let's go into the numbers. In the 956 regular season games Scott Stevens played for New Jersey, 93 goals, 337 assists for 430 points. In the playoffs, played 153 games, put up 15 goals, 45 assists for 60 career points. 10 NHL All-Star games, all with New Jersey, which is basically his entire time. On top of the 1994 NHL Plus Minus Award, he won the 2000 Conn Smythe Trophy, as well as 3 Stanley Cups, 95, 2000, and 2003. He's named to the first NHL All-Star team once, in 1994, and named to the second NHL All-Star team 3 times, 1992, 1997, and 2001. And he does hold some Devils records. More specifically, one, most assists in a season for the team. That coming from 93-94, which we discussed. He was named one of the NHL's 100 greatest players during their NHL Centennial season in 2017. And more importantly, he was the first New Jersey Devil to have his number retired on February 3rd, 2006. You want my opinion of the guy? Sure, why not, right? Despite the shaky start with the team, I think it's relatively safe to say without Stevens, there's no cups. I mean, yeah, they had Brodeur, yeah, they had Danickel, yes, they had Niedermeyer, Elias, all those guys come along. Without Stevens, I don't think they make that step. I think they'd be borderline fringe at best. But man, this guy can hit. Man, this guy had a slap shot. Great to watch, especially when he was doing the hitting, throwing at the physical body. He was always one of my favorite defensemen to watch. And a lot of it was his sandpaper style. But, yeah, very safe to say without Stevens, without that master stroke by Lou Lamoriello back in 1991, success would have been few and far between. So definitely a good move, not just for New Jersey, but for Stevens to go along and go to Jersey and play out the rest of his career there. Miss watching a guy like him in Jersey, I really do. It's Trev's Hockey Show. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've made it to this point. Let me know you're here. Hit that thumbs up. If you want to. That red button, you know what it does. Hit it up, let's do it. Socials, description down below. So move forward. I'm going to write up another retired number so I can keep coming at you with them. But either way, in the meantime, and between time, be looking for more videos from the Trev. Later.